Hello, friends, comrades, and interested others. I'm thinking about changing my little intro thing that I say because it just sounds a little overdone at this point. But I don't know, we're workshopping it. I wanted to talk today about sacredness, the concept of sacredness, what it means in practice, sacredness as this kind of thing that all human civilizations and societies engage in, whether they acknowledge it in those words or not. Kind of analyze what things are held to be sacred in Western capitalist, majority white, secular culture, and then talk about, what things should be held sacred. What does it mean to sanctify something? What does it mean to desanctify something? So let's just get into it. I know it seems like a weird topic because most of my videos are kind of political now, and this might seem like it's not a political thing, but I assure you it is a highly political thing. And I'm approaching it from both a political lens and a spiritual lens, as I don't really consider the two to be separate at this point. So, to sanctify means to make holy. And the word holy in English stems from the word whole, which means uninjured, sound, or complete. And so, what we consider to be sacred or holy denotes what we consider to be uninjured, pure, or whole, and what we would prioritize protecting from injury or violation. Secular societies like those in North America, who consider themselves to be primarily non-religious in their public life and politics, generally refuse to engage with the language of sacredness when discussing their societal values. But that doesn't mean that these societies do not hold things to be sacred in practice. The modern concept of religion comes about when a set of cultural and spiritual practices are divorced from politics and public life. And so, before the rise of Western capitalist and secular hegemony, many practices that are now considered to be religious, such as Buddhism and North American indigenous spiritual practices, were just culturally and spiritually informed modes of politics and public life. Because they were ingrained in, the daily communal activities, they were not religious because in order for them to be considered religious, there would have had to be a line where those beliefs and practices stopped and other areas of life began. So a mode of spirituality and culture only becomes religious when it is separated from our daily lives and relegated to a kind of private, individual, or family practice rather than a general communal way of living. It was important for capitalism to create this distinction between the political and the spiritual because it helps it justify itself. By insisting that it's not spiritual, not cultural, and not religious, capitalism can then defend itself from accusations of cultural bias and kind of claim this stance of objectivity. But this status of non-religious that's given to Western secular capitalist society is much more a reflection of its domination and integration with public life and politics than it's a reflection of any genuine aspirituality of the culture, if anything like that could even be said to exist. If we instead conceive of a religion as a set of values and beliefs about how people should live in society, which holds certain things to be sacred, then it is readily apparent that consumer capitalism itself possesses the characteristics of a religion. It's just the most public and dominating belief system, which allows it to evade this classification of religion. And this is not to say that capitalism has a healthy relationship with the sacred in any way, shape, or form. In fact, capitalism and Western Enlightenment thinking has been engaged in a war on the sacred for hundreds of years, and in many ways, its refusal to conceive of its own values as sacred allows it to evade its own onslaught of desecration. And this desecration, literally meaning the violation of the sacred, has obviously had terrible consequences. If water is not considered to be sacred, then we can do whatever we want to it, and it doesn't matter if it's ruined. If we don't consider the land to be sacred, then we can deforest and mine and extract and pollute it without moral consequence. If we consider certain forms of human life to not be sacred, then we can kill, imprison, displace, and exploit people. If we consider difference and diversity to not be sacred, then we can perpetuate agendas of eugenics and genocide and oppression against non-normative bodies, and people who are in positions of power can establish constructs of what is normal and what is desirable in a way that benefits them. So that leads me to the question of what is held to be sacred in Western capitalist secular society. Wealth accumulation and consumption are definitely considered to be sacred in capitalist societies. If you look at our public holidays, for example, literally holy days, while many of them have Christian and earlier Celtic, Norse, or Germanic roots, they are all these secularized days of celebration defined by massive uptick in material consumption. The main one being Christmas, but the same is true of Halloween and Easter. Holy days in our society are literally celebrations of ritual spending and consumption, and regardless of your personal religious beliefs, it is difficult if not impossible to fully opt out of these public rituals. Our political systems, which I refuse to label as democracy and will refer to rather as representative electoralism, are another thing that's held to be sacred. Despite the innumerable abuses of working class people, Black and Indigenous people, and people of color, LGBT people, people with disabilities, the land itself, migrants, the list goes on. Many people, even today, as we're nearing the election between Donald Trump and Joseph Biden, find it pretty much inconceivable that one would pursue political change not through electoral means first, with all other methods of political involvement being supplementary. The politically active non-voter is a pariah in all mainstream political conversations, even though we continue to make literal blood sacrifices and sacrifices of our land, our community autonomy, our health, our futures, our water, to the altar of representative electoral politics. Empirical science, and I feel like this is going to be the most controversial one, is another sacrament of Western society, and it is the one that seems to serve the most in the desecration of the natural world. Even as I make this video, I feel compelled to acknowledge the positive achievements of science in the areas of medicine and infrastructure, so that the entire content of this video will not be dismissed out of hand as having violated the sacredness of Western science. While Western science claims to be in pursuit of knowledge, in reality it has served the purpose of narrowing and homogenizing reality. Within the scientific model, there is no room for multiple truths, and the thousands-year-old truths of other cultures are now considered to be invalid if they don't hold up to the Western scientific model. And then, if after hundreds of years of cultural genocide, science finds out that actually a practice did have some value according to the Western scientific priorities, it's just kind of like, whoops, sorry for destroying your culture, science just hadn't caught up yet. When it comes down to it, scientism, defined by Wikipedia as the promotion of science as the best or only objective means by which society should determine normative and epistemological values, generally does not engage with the question of whether objective truth is actually achievable by human beings, and whether the achievement or pursuit of objectivity would actually be good for the world. The reality is that the pursuit of singular, objective, cold, hard truth has often been the end towards which horrific means have been perpetrated. And again, that is not to say that science has nothing to offer the world or that science has had no positive achievements. It is a valid lens through which we can view the world. But often when we sing the praises of science, we don't pay equal attention to the fact that weapons of perpetual war, genocide and ecocide, the mass production of environmental toxins, all of the unethical missteps in the fields of psychiatry and psychology are also scientific achievements. I am not so much in criticism of the validity of the model itself, so much as I am in criticism of the values that inform scientism. That a method of viewing and interacting with the world that is not at its core rooted in values of respect for all life risks perpetuating massive harms on the world, and in fact has done and continues to do so. And I know that many people involved in different scientific fields will disagree and say that ethics is a fundamental part of science, especially in the medical field. But even in the medical field, ethics is a class that you take to inform science. I would not say that it is fundamental to science, as we have seen in many instances throughout history where ethics and morals have been cast off completely, and yet no one tries to say that science was not science. So that is why I say that Western science is not, as a fundamental feature, grounded in respect for all life. And yet it has become the hegemonic model of reality through which all other realities must now be filtered in order to be considered deserving of existence. And I find that to be morally wrong. I will not say that this is an exhaustive analysis, but we've identified capital consumption, electoral politics, and empirical science as being some of the sacraments of Western society. I would also add to this list whiteness, as many of the values that we claim to be applied to human beings in general are often only in practice accessible to white people and serve in the protection and perpetuation of whiteness as an identity and a system of economic relationships, though I think the thorough discussion of whiteness probably warrants its own video. I think it's fair to say that these things qualify as sacraments because their value is largely cultural. It's not rooted in objectivity or human need. And yet they are considered fundamental features of human life that we engage in acts of worship towards and would prioritize protecting from injury or violation. So then, what are some things that maybe should be considered sacred, that our ancestors and people in other places and times and cultures have considered to be sacred that are not held in this regard by Western culture? In colonial cultures, the land is definitely not sacred, water is not sacred, the ocean is not sacred, plants and animals are not sacred, food is not sacred, women and gender variant people are not sacred, racial and cultural difference is not sacred, neurodivergence and physical divergence is not sacred, dreams are not sacred, elders are not sacred, our ancestors are not sacred, death is not sacred, and neither is birth, and our own selves are not considered to be sacred. All of these things that are fundamental to our lives and all of life on Earth, all source of beauty and sustenance and balance in the world, are not considered to be sacred, are not worshipped, are not seen as pure, whole, or deserving of protection from violation. The only things I could really identify as sacred in the Western capitalist society in which I live are material consumption, our current political systems, empirical science, and whiteness. I believe that if it's possible for us to begin healing ourselves, our communities, our cultures, and ways of being in the world, then a fundamental part of that is going to be re-engaging with the sacred. Sacredness is a natural and powerful part of all human culture, and when we come to understand that, we can then choose the things that we hold sacred and work towards changing the spiritual direction of our cultures. If you would like an optional homework assignment, I would ask you in a written reflection to think of 3 to 5 things or beings that we as a society should consider to be sacred, and also to think of what things we would do collectively to protect, honor, and care for those things. If you would like further reading, I would advise you to read Columbus and Other Cannibals by Jack D. Forbes, which I will continue to recommend until all of my subscribers have read it. I would also recommend again Religion and Empire by Richard A. Horsley, and I would also recommend Lessons from Mark Van Steinwick, who you can find at the Center for Prophetic Imagination on social media, and they also have a website I'll link to in the description. If you would like to support my work that I do on making YouTube videos and also community organizing and writing and other things I've got going on, you can donate to my PayPal for a one-time donation, or donate to my Patreon for a recurring donation, and I will link those things in the description. I would also like to strongly encourage viewers of this video to donate to the Legal Defense Fund for the land defenders at 1492 Landback Lane, which is a land dispute that is happening on Six Nations Reserve in Ontario, what is known as Ontario. We all need to be doing everything that we can to materially and financially support Indigenous land defenders within our means. So yeah, please give that a look. I'll also link some resources in the description to read more about that. They also have a call for solidarity actions happening on October 9th. So if you would like to participate in or organize a solidarity action in your city or town, that would be fantastic. Even if you don't live in Canada, even if you live in a tiny small town, please get involved in solidarity work for 1492 Landback Lane. Thanks for watching. I hope this was informative and engaging, and I will see you next time. Peace out.